This is Feed Your Mind Wellness. I'm Dr. Sandy, and I'm so pleased to have with me today Congressman Robert Dole from the United States 10th Congressional District, House of Representatives. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sandy. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. So I was recently at the wellness fair that you organized for caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
And how did this come about? What motivated you to organize a caregiver fair?
Well, when we look at caregivers in general, most caregivers don't realize they're caregivers just to begin with, and there's over 65 million caregivers in the country right now. Mm-hmm. And whether it's a spouse taking care of a sick spouse, or somebody that's taking care of a wounded veteran, or grandparents taking care of grandchildren, there's just a tremendous amount of caregivers out there, and oftentimes I think they feel alone, they feel isolated, and they don't often know of the resources that are out across the country, and specifically regionally, or even around the corner, that may be able to help them in their daily lives. So I wanted to make sure we were able to highlight some of the great resources that are here in the 10th District that are able to help caregivers provide some of the very basic services for their loved ones.
This was a wonderful idea. And these 65 million caregivers are quite a diverse group with often hidden needs. And I went to speak with some of them at the resource fair, and here's a closer look at the needs of one family caregiver. I'm talking with Robert.
Yes.
And Robert has some experiences as a caregiver. Robert, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences as a caregiver?
Yes. It's back. My mother had Alzheimer's for at least 12 years that we know of, and it was my father cared for her almost exclusively, to the point of suffering a couple strokes. We finally convinced him, it was very difficult, huge argument, that he needed to get her into assisted living. If she deteriorates any further, there'd be no way that she could adjust. It was just a huge fight. He finally did agree, and amazingly, about 3 or 4 months after they were in the assisted living, he thanked us for doing it. Finally realizing, that he needed help after the fact, of course.
And that was hard for you as well to watch this.
Absolutely. My mother would, starting to forget who she would call me at 2 o'clock in the morning saying there was a strange man running around in the house. So I'd run over there from Wheeling to Chicago. Turned out to be my dad. And so it just, a very, very hard situation.
I'm with Jamie and Chester, and you are grandparents, I understand, raising your grandchild. Can you tell me about that?
We were raising a granddaughter since she was 3 for 7 years. We lost custody of her, and we've got her back. After 11 months, she truly lived what she calls a nightmare come true, and the system failed her, and we're out looking for different resources and different ideas for how to help protect these children.
Dr. Sandy, one of the things that we found from doing this caregivers event is that many caregivers actually don't get out of the home. And therefore, it's very difficult for them to get information about some of the resources and the services that are available to them. That's why I'm pleased that you can either go to my website at www.dole.house.gov, or also you can go to the website here that you have, and it's going to be up on public access.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what is that website?
That's feedyourmindwellness.com.
Well, again, another great resource for caregivers that are out there to be able to go to another place, and hopefully they're going to be able to have access to this show as well. So I really appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. And caregivers often slip into that role, and they don't even realize all of a sudden they're caregivers. And to highlight the needs of the caregiver and how they can take care of themselves, you had a very special keynote speaker. Can you tell us who he was, a little bit about him?
Well, Daniel Kuhn, who was certainly has had 35 years of experience in healthcare and aging, was the keynote speaker down at the National Conference of Caregivers in Dallas last year. And he happens to be someone that lives locally, and so we were very fortunate to be able to tap into his expertise, to bring him to this Caregivers Expo, to be able to share some of that expertise, not only with some of the different organizations that came, the 40 different organizations, but with the hundreds of people that were able to come through the door and be able to have access to the kind of information that he was able to provide.
And I attended his speech and was just so impressed. One of the things he talked about was the caregiver as being like on a marathon, and you have to train for it as you would train to be in a marathon. Here's a closer look at the keynote speaker's address.
There are millions of caregivers in this country, and there have been a lot of social researchers looking at the mental health, particularly of older adults who care for loved ones, showing that depression is very common and showing that even premature death is an unfortunate effect of providing care. So self-care, I think, is essential not only for the well-being of the caregivers, but for the care receivers. If the caregiver is burned out, the care receiver is going to suffer. Here's a scene in an airplane. I'm sure you've all been aboard, and before you take off, you're directed by the flight attendant to buckle in, and in the event the cabin loses air pressure, oxygen will come down from the ceiling. You've heard this line, right? And what are you told to do next? Put your mask on first, and then you assist someone else. The reason being, if you are unconscious due to loss of cabin pressure, you can't help anybody else. So the same principle holds true here. You have to take care of yourself in order to care for other people. So part of self-care also is really trying to understand the needs of the person in your care. So whatever the condition may be, maybe it's Alzheimer's disease, maybe it's stroke, maybe it's cancer, maybe it's diabetes, becoming responsible for educating yourself about what is the nature of this condition. So I would encourage all of you, regardless of the condition, and there's a disease-related organization for every conceivable medical diagnosis today, that you would contact these organizations through their toll-free numbers or go to their website, because they have reliable information. I say this because you can't always count on your healthcare professional to spend the time with you to educate you about your disease. The average Medicare recipient who goes to the doctor has, on average, 5 minutes of FaceTime with the doctor. 5 minutes. That's hardly enough time to go through the intricacies of diabetes or cancer or stroke. This next slide is about what I call shifting the balance of power. Now, some of you might wonder, what's power got to do with this? Well, there's power in any relationship. Where I got this analogy is, I remember a woman that had cared for her husband with dementia, and she and her husband had been ballroom dancers throughout their married life. And about 3 years into his diagnosis, she came to me one day. She said, I think I've had a breakthrough in understanding my relationship now with my husband. She explained that, they had a fairly traditional marriage. He was the macho man and she was the dutiful wife, although she says, I know I'm smarter than him. And she said, we've been ballroom dancers throughout our married life, and now I've got to be the lead dancer. He no longer has the mental capacity to make sound judgments. He goes into a room and he's embarrassed by his memory loss. He tries to do things that he no longer can do for himself. So I've decided I need to assert a more powerful role in our marriage. I'm going to be the lead dancer. If you are a primary caregiver, I would encourage any caregivers to rally their supporters and to cut your losses. By this I mean, if there are people in your life who are always second-guessing your decisions, and they are naysayers and they are negative all the time, and they're absolutely just not giving practical help or emotional support, that you make sure that those people are marginalized, because your attention needs to focus in on your own well-being and to surround yourself with positive problem-solving people. So if someone asks for help, if someone says, can I ever help you? Or if you ever need help, that's when you pull your date book out and say, I have an opening next Saturday. I would appreciate a few hours' time so I can go to a movie for the first time in 3 years. So coach those who are willing to be coached. And for those who are not willing to be coached, wow, draw a line. Set some limits and say, I don't need that kind of help. I think this can be such a lonely experience that it's vital to find a confidant. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a golfing buddy, or maybe it's a professional counselor. A minister, a rabbi, a social worker, somebody where you can share the ups and downs. Because there's a lot of grief involved in providing care. So someone who understands that and will keep you even keeled, will help you laugh and help you cry. And to try to carve out time every single day for a little bit of fun, whatever it may be, that soothes your body, mind, or spirit. For some people, just taking 5 minutes by themselves to pray or to read or to listen to a book on tape is a major challenge. The problem is, how do you carve out that time? And it usually means you've got to share the care. It means you've got to give up a little bit of control. It means you've got to bring in the reinforcements, got to ask for help. It might take a little bit of humility to say, I need help. After all, this is America. We are taught to be self-reliant. And to reach out, and maybe if you don't have that kind of help within your own family, you reach out to paid services. So again, getting back to self-care, watching weight, watching sleep, watching medications, taking responsibility for exercise, physical well-being, mental well-being, doing something on a regular basis. And I love this one, keeping a sense of humor about yourself, all right? So I think having people around you who give you a sense of perspective, so you're not always sweating the small stuff. So planning ahead, this means doing some legal and financial planning, powers of attorney, making sure we have our ducks in a row before a crisis occurs. Now, not everybody follows that advice. It's like we all know we're going to die, but not everybody has a will. Most of us will develop chronic medical conditions. And yet very few of us have advanced directives. So my recommendation is always to consider the power of attorney for health care, or something we call the 5 wishes, which we have available at our table at Rainbow Hospice. But this means designating someone to act on your behalf, to handle your money, to handle your healthcare affairs, and to be able to have those conversations with healthcare providers if you're no longer able to do this. And to talk about options for housing if living in one's own home is no longer a viable choice. Because this takes a lot of organizing ability. And when you're sick, you cannot be consumed by a lot of that stress. You need someone who's got your back. There's an old saying among military people, there's no atheists in foxholes. Did you ever hear that? I believe anybody who's providing care to a loved one, regardless of the condition, wrestles with some very deep questions like, why does a good God allow bad things to happen? And I don't know if there are any satisfactory answers, but I know many people reach into their spiritual traditions to look for answers and find comfort in their spiritual traditions. And lastly, to celebrate achievements. I'm not just talking about at the end of caregiving when someone may die. I'm talking about along the way. Maybe you have an aha experience like that woman I mentioned who said, I'm now the lead dancer. I encourage many people to keep a log or a journal so that they understand how far they've come on this long journey, to appreciate the fact that they have had insights and that they are no longer arguing with their loved one, that they have learned to curb their tongue, they have had successes in engaging other people in providing care, that they've used services successfully, that they've planned ahead financially and legally. So to really take into account the progress along the way. And I just want to leave you with a couple of quotes. Maybe you've heard of the Serenity Prayer, but I think anybody dealing with any medical condition, this really comes out of Al-Anon. For those of you familiar with AA and Al-Anon, this is a typical prayer set at meetings, but I think it does apply to caregiving as well. There are certainly unchangeable things about medical conditions, but we can change our perspective about how we go about providing care. And it's all summed up in my last slide, which is, we cannot control the wind, but we can learn to adjust ourselves.
So taking it one day at a time and remembering the importance of self-care, not getting too far into overcare. So there were a lot of resources at this
There
fair.
were a lot of resources there.
How did you find them?
Well, one of the things that we've been doing is we've been going around and talking to senior centers all across the 10th District. And these senior centers are great resources for the various communities. And in them, there are some really talented people that have access to a number of these different organizations. So we first went to them to find out what are these organizations, how can we get additional resources and put them all together. And then we contacted and reached out to the various organizations, whether it be the American Cancer Society or CJE Senior Health or some of those others, to say, would you be willing to come for an afternoon, or actually most of a day, to be able to share with us exactly what you're doing and be able to have those resources available for caregivers throughout the 10th District. And they were happy to do so.
And what a great way to serve the needs of Illinois seniors. But there are other ways that you're meeting the needs
Absolutely.
of seniors.
I mean, seniors play such a critical role for our communities, but one of the things that we have in our office, we're in a service business. And so if you're a senior and you have an issue with Medicare, we just had actually a Medicare town hall meeting where we reached out to literally 35,000 seniors in the 10th District, because open enrollment for Medicare is going to end on December 7th. So we wanted to make sure that we were reaching out to them to let them know of any changes that they needed to make in their Medicare. Now is the time to do it. We had with us on there someone from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services on the phone to answer direct questions directly. But you can also call our office, and we are happy to help you if you've got a Medicare issue, an issue with Social Security, if you've got an issue with veterans benefits through the VA. That's all things that we are doing on a regular basis for constituents throughout the 10th District.
They're there to help them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Congressman, did you find any hidden gems at the resource fair?
Well, the resource fair, there were a lot of hidden gems, and ones I would say, certainly the American Cancer Society was great. CJE in terms of the work that they do, but as you and I talked about maybe a little bit earlier, it was, from my perspective, taking a look at the Level Center and the work that they provide for veterans. It is the first of its kind in the country. So what happened was that the VA and the Department of Defense came together to save a hospital, combine resources, and it's really been fantastic for veterans. They are looking to try to replicate this across the country, and so having it be the first of its kind, it's truly a hidden gem, not only for our seniors, but more specifically for our veterans right here in the 10th District.
Well, let's go to the fair now and take a close look at these resources. I'm here today with Debbie Hagee, and Debbie is from the Family Service Prevention, Education, and Counseling Program. Debbie, can you tell us a little bit about the services that you provide?
Well, at our agency, we provide counseling services to all the seniors in Lake County. We do in-home counseling sessions, or they can come into our Highland Park office, or our Barrington office, or our Wakanda office. And we also provide caregiver services. We have a caregiver resource center, and at the Caregiver Resource Center, we provide things like assistance for legal advice. We provide respite service. We link caregivers to resources in the community to help them out with their caregiving.
Just what is respite care?
Respite care is an opportunity for the caregiver to have a couple hours away to recharge themselves, to make themselves a priority for a few hours on a weekend or during the week, whatever's convenient for them. In fact, I had an intake call a few months ago, and it was from a woman who was looking for some caregiver counseling. And I took all her information, and then I asked her when she would be available, and she said, well, I think the best time would be as I drive to work. And I was totally shocked at that, because this woman was so so sparse on time and just really didn't have an opportunity to take care of herself, that she was willing to talk about things that were really, really emotionally charged on her way to work. And I just advised her, I said, I really don't think that that's the best opportunity for you to take care of yourself. And I advised her to take some time and think about it and let me know if she wanted to do some caregiver counseling in home
Sure.
at some point in time.
So, Pam, we're talking today about caregivers, the forgotten person in the equation. Can you tell us what your center does to support the caregiver?
They can get counseling, they can find out about respite, home health care, home health aid. This is a very unique program where all the other programs in the Federal Healthcare Center really are geared towards the veteran. This is completely geared toward the caregiver.
And caregivers often forget to take care of themselves.
They do. As I mentioned, there's the beautiful Caregiver Center where we
What's in that
encourage
center?
we encourage the caregivers to come to the center. We have complimentary hot and cold drinks. We have snacks. I have a whole caregiver resource library there where they can read about how to take care of themselves, how to exercise. It's also a place where they can meet other caregivers that they can relate to and share with, because they tend to feel very isolated at home.
So if someone is taking care of a loved one and they need to get out themselves, do you have a service then? Catholic Charities could come in and have a few hours?
Yes, we
so-
do. We do have, it all depends on how they score, or how many hours that they're allowed to have during the week. It could be 3, it could be 6 hours. So if a loved one needs to get out to do some shopping, we do have someone that can come in there and help that person out for an hour or so while that person does their duties, so they can be able to, spend a little time for themselves.
Sure, so this would give some relief for the caretaker.
Yes.
What area do you serve?
We service all of Lake County, from the border of Wisconsin to Lake Cook Road, Sheridan Road to Route 12. So it's basically Lake County.
Okay.
Well, CJE Senior Life provides an array of services. We're a full comprehensive agency. And specifically for the caregiver, we offer, we have our own website for the
Great.
caregiver. So that would be first and foremost. And all the resources are available on our caregiving website, www.caregivinghelp.org. So that's certainly could be very beneficial. And then also for the caregiver, maybe resource and benefits. So we have available resource specialists all in the Northwest community to help with any kind of benefits or information and referrals, so that it can be user-friendly for any kind of caregiver or for the individual themselves. And the area that we serve is certainly all of Cook, Lake County. We go far and wide. We also have geriatric care management services, certainly to be a respite for the caregiver. At times, certainly, they can't be everywhere, so we do offer care managers that can be of help.
I'm with Donna Copeland Hill, who is with the Northeastern Illinois Agency on Aging. Hi.
Good morning.
You provide a lot of services for caregivers. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I can. It's through the Federal Older Americans Act, and it provides services for family members of any age who are taking care of older loved ones. And what we have family members can take a temporary break from their caregiving duties when they're stressed out or they have to leave town or whatever.
Sure.
They can receive what we call gap-filling services, which mean if there's something that can't be paid for in any other way, for some reason they need incontinence supplies, grab bars, that kind of thing, we can help with that. Also, there are legal services available to family caregivers. Also, there's caregiver training and education services that they can receive through the Older Americans Act funding.
Well, this is certainly a vast array of services that you're offering so that they don't slip into overcare, which is a big problem.
That's correct. We recognize the value of family caregivers. Actually, 80% of the nation's seniors are taken care of by family members rather than by into an institution or that kind of care, and it's the family members that are actually worth, I forgot how many billions, but it is in billions of dollars, and they are so valuable. We're so grateful for what they do.
Grandparents, there's 7 million children in the United States being raised in grandparent-headed households. Some are there with the parents also. Some are there temporary because the parents for some reason can't take care of their children. And then there's a portion of them that are going into the long haul. They're raising the kids to college because the parents cannot do it for one reason or another. A huge number of the reasons are that they are substance abusers and just cannot take care of their own children. The children come to the grandparents, they may be abused, neglected, and or abandoned. So they come with many issues. Some of them suffer from ADD, ADHD, fetal alcohol syndrome, post-traumatic stress, and attachment disorder. Some of them need help in grieving the loss of their parents and the life as they knew it, whether it was good or bad. It's what the child knew, and they need help.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, how are you?
Tell me what the Illinois Respite Coalition does.
But one thing I really want to talk about today is that in '09, we were awarded a federal lifespan respite grant in partnership with the Illinois Department on Aging. And one of the mandates of that grant is emergency respite funding. And with that funding, we can provide emergency respite services for any family who may need this. And the goal of this is to be able to have families utilize this funding in an unforeseen, unplanned circumstance. The way to access this funding is to visit illinoisrespite.org. There's an emergency respite tab that can tell you everything about this funding. And it's really important that we use these funds. It is federal money that we were able to bring into our state, and we have to utilize it by the end of next year. So I encourage everybody to go on that and to be able to use these funds.
Congressman, do you plan to repeat this event?
Well, I do plan to repeat the event. This first one was a success, but we want to build on this success because obviously the first time you do something, you get some people to come. If you can repeat it and it was successful, hopefully we'll be able to get more and more people to come, more and more providers of services to come, and it will just build upon itself. So we're looking to build on the success we've had thus far, and we think it's going to be really beneficial for our community and for our caregivers.
Absolutely. Well, you are to be commended for bringing this to the community, for organizing it, and for shedding light on such an important topic, which is often under the surface.
Well, it is under the surface, and I take my own experiences with my grandmother, and I know that when she went on dialysis, it was something that, although I wasn't the primary caregiver, I found myself taking time out to make sure that we were able to get her there on a regular basis, and it's something that families will find themselves being a caregiver. Almost everyone out there watching will find themselves as a caregiver at some point in time in their lives.
Well, thank you for taking time out